So I think I understand what Taran was trying to say. Took me a while, but it makes sense. He wants the animation to stagger, going off of this picture here. He wants the animation to stagger when it starts, so that it all comes down in basically kind of a waterfall. And that can be done. And it can be done using no more than 3 layers. One of the most popular ways to do it, however, is to combine layers. As you can see in this video, he's taken a shape layer, copied it multiple times over, and staggered each one so that it sends off at a different time, but you still have this many layers being rendered at a time. And that just seems like a lot of wasted computing time. Now what you can do instead is make it one single layer by creating a Photoshop layer. That's what I'm going to be showing you now. So 1920 by 1080, or however big your comp size will be. And then we are going to make the background pure black. My apologies, I've been messing around here. We're going to make the background a pure black. And on top of it, we're going to make a foreground layer that will have a white rectangle. I'd say this big will probably be fine. We'll rotate it until we find a nice angle. Hit OK, rasterize the layer, and then we will duplicate it about 10 times. I say 10 is a good number. And I did that by hitting Control J on my keyboard, and then drag one layer to where you want the animation's first beam to start, and drag one layer where you want the animation's farthest right beam to start. And then drag all the layers at once, go to Layer, Distribute, Horizontal Centers. And then we're going to turn off the black layer for this and save as PNG. I've already done this once before, so this time I'm going to save it as lines 3 because I am original. And then we will take all of these, merge them together, and begin one of the important steps. So in colors you get hue, saturation, and brightness. What we need to look at is brightness. Right now it's 100% and that is pure white. And instead of that, we're going to change this to different brightnesses depending on how many of these pillars there are. There are 10 pillars, 100 divided by 10, 10. So we're going to do steps of 10, starting from 100 going down to about 10. So instead, 100 is the first pillar here, 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. That's all in brightness. So next one is 90 on our charts. We're going to just fill this one as 90% brightness, 80, and then so on and so forth. You get the point. This is probably the only manually taxing part of this, and it's not even that terrible. Not for the gains that you get out of it. Being able to have a lot more flexibility later on down the line. Now, I will say that this method is not the most flexible. I assume that that's probably the sequencing that I showed you in that YouTube video. However, I hate lots of layers. So the further away I can get from tons and tons of layers taking up my processing power, which I have very little of, the better. So I'm going to say time 3 because I am original. And in After Effects, we're going to create a new composition, 1920 by 1080, and we're going to add these 2 layers that we just made, lines 3 and time 3. So we are going to take lines 3, add it here, going to make a mask that covers the entirety of it. And then we go to Mask Layers, Mask Path, create a keyframe on the path, go forward a few frames, and then we will drag the whole thing down. Don't forget to set the mask to subtract. That way it starts at nothing and reveals the lines. Then from there we will move these keyframes forward so that there's a little bit of a buffer with nothing and then the layers showing. We'll take this whole thing, right click, pre-compose, or use the special key combination that I don't remember, and we'll just call this lines 33 because I suck at typing. Now that this is pre-composed, it's just an animation of the lines going down. We're getting close, but where's that pizzazz? Oh, here it is. Time 3, drag it into the comp, go to Effects and Presets, search for Time Displacement, drag it onto the lines pre-comp, set the displacement layer to Time, and then from there, hide the original Time 3 layer. What this will do is animate lines going down based on the brightness of the time layer. So because we set white to be 100% brightness and we stepped it down 10% each time this column came up, the computer registers that as setting the time differential to be about 10% in between each one of these. Now if you want it to ramp up, you just change the time differential between whichever one of these you want to start first and start last back in the Photoshop time comp here. But if you want them to all start at the same time, this is the perfect way to do it. And the good thing about this is that, let's say I like the animation, I like how fast it's going, but I want these to be more dramatic in how much they space apart. So you can go up here and say the max displacement for time is about 2 seconds, let's say. Now, this works only to some extent without affecting the other line, but if you really want to hone it in perfectly, you will have to look at the lines pre-comp, go in there, and change how soon or how close or how far this keyframe is from each other. This will change how dramatic each frame is from the next. As you can see here, it's only changing a small gap, whereas if we had adjusted it more, let's say we bring them closer together, each one of these frames is more dramatic, and even closer, more dramatic. So the closer they are, the more dramatic each one of these is if we bring it back to the time displacement comp. So what we're going to do is just render this out. Wow, look at that, without a hitch. Now, because this is an Adobe thing, you'll probably run into some hiccups, but for basic stuff, it's not a bad way to go about it. So maybe this is what you were looking for? If not, just try the time staggering thing. That seems to work fine.